question of wisdom. Is it a good idea to have these large groups, things like this, to have such a visible presence? That's a different question, and that's one of the arguments really against Zionism. God did a kindness of spreading the Jewish people out in a wide area all throughout the world this way, to avoid persecution. And you put all your eggs in one basket, they're likely to break. Everyone gathers together in Israel. The Ramban, he brings this in Parshas Vayishlach, it's well known, that Nachmanides brings. It's not necessarily in our best interest. However, like I said from the beginning, or like I said before just now, is that we are seeking to be good neighbors. And so, some people were, even within the community, were initially upset when the Satmar Rebbe said, to move, that, parts of the community should move to Monroe. But on the other hand, it wasn't uprooting Williamsburg. It was just in addition to it, and all the other places surround. So that's not really, an issue. But having this visibility, having the visibility of a village and so forth, is not really in the interest of Satmar, who want to avoid persecution, want to avoid being difficult, want to avoid difficulties, want to lay low. And a bracha shel davos ayin. V'yid guloi b'kerev haaretz, want to be like fish in the midst of the land, hidden away. And there's, on one hand, there's more visibility living in the city among everyone, and more like fish hidden away, in a small, secluded rural area like Kiryas. But on the other hand, the visibility in some ways is greater. So how do we balance that? And it's a question. How do we come about to make a balance on something like this? So it's a question in general. In any event, it remains that the major aspect of the Satmar ideology is to avoid conflict, avoid strife, live in peace. And so the question is, how we see so many of the neighbors around Kiryas disapproving of what Kiryas does. How does this fit into this theology, the anti-Zionist theology, so forth, that we have to live in peace? How does that fit together? The answer is really quite simple. The whole reason why, now the gathering happened without the village initially. The settlement, the purchase of the land, and the people moving there. There was never, from the original intention to form a village and so forth. All of these things were done for one reason: in order to live in peace with the neighbors, in order to avoid conflict. And this has been rung true by any level-thinking non-Jewish politicians in the area of Monroe, in Orange County in general, and in the greater New York State in general, have recognized this, that these actions that Kiryas has taken have not been in the interest of Kiryas. They've been in the interest of Kiryas living their lives without affecting their neighbors. And so the first step was the formation of the village. It met with opposition from within the Satmar community more than from without. But in essence, it was there to help make peace. There are minor examples, such as the fire department and the library system. How Kiryas in recent years, they're no longer part of the library system. They don't pay library taxes, but they can't vote in the library system either, and they're independent of that. And of course, they can't have library membership either because they don't pay the taxes. for the library, not for other things, but just for this one thing, for the library. And that's really a really great libertarian example that's, I think, is wonderful and purely American libertarian, perfect, beautiful. And it's really in the interest, again, if you don't want Kiryas to have a say in the library, they're not banning books, they're not pushing books, they have nothing to do with it, they're totally separate from it, and they lose out that they can't use the library. That's one small example. Another example is the Marriage Licenses Bureau, which incidentally a lot of the anti-Hasidic rhetoric and propaganda claims that the Hasidic Jews don't get marriage licenses and they don't get married legally, but that's the total, not only is that not true, it's the total opposite. The fact of the matter is that most of the marriage licenses in the town of Monroe, 75% of the marriage licenses in the town of Monroe are from Kiryas Joel, to the point where the town, since they were redoing their town hall and things and they didn't have much room, they couldn't handle the sheer volume of marriage licenses to the point where they deputized a village clerk to make marriage licenses. Also unique in general, villages are not the ones who are issuing marriage licenses, but it's only the towns that issue the marriage licenses. And they're very expedient and strict with the laws, I would say, from my own experience, seeing more so than other towns as far as marriage licenses go. And the Rebbe himself signs the marriage licenses, makes them legal. I saw myself in the Satmar Rebbe's office a big stack of marriage licenses and envelopes to be sent back to the village to be registered legally as legal marriages. But the biggest example, and the most obvious example, and the most controversial example in Kiryas Joel is the school district. From within the Hasidic community, the school district is one of the most opposed things. Many of the rabbis outside the Satmar community and many rabbis in the more cloistered, extremist sections, Torah of the Satmar community, strongly and bitterly opposed the Kiryas Joel school district as heretical. And there they might have a point, except the fact of the matter is, and this is not necessarily why it was formed, but the outcome of the formation of the Kiryas Joel school district has been one of the most positive things, not only by virtue of the fact that it's a wonderful school district and they really go out of their way to provide great and wonderful services. I know myself firsthand, my children attend school in Kiryas Joel. My daughter needs for speech therapy. They bend over backwards, a level of professionalism, and I've never seen it in my own school district, in Monticello School District where I reside. We had so much difficulty to get services, and they were decent services, they weren't poor, but the level of professionalism that I've seen in Kiryas Joel way outshines what I saw in Monticello, and the ease by which we received the services was incredible, as opposed to Monticello was very, very difficult. That's Aleph, that's A, that's Exhibit A. But more than that, and I'm not here to put down what happened in East Ramapo, because it's very simple. This country was founded, and we're going to get into the American side of things, this country was founded on the idea of no taxation without representation. So, in East Ramapo, in the Muncie area, in Rockland County, New York, you have the overwhelming majority of parents, of taxpayers in East Ramapo paying the school tax are parents who do send their children to school, but not to the public schools. They send to the private schools. Now, in New York State, there are certain mandated services that are required to follow students in a school district, residing in a school district, even if they attend a school outside of the district. and even if they attend private schools, there are certain mandated services that are required by law. There's no way to get away from them. And to be fair, like I said, no taxation without representation. The people who are paying the taxes, they have the right to decide what they're paying taxes for. Now, I understand many of the rabbis who reside in East Ramapo were opposed to the Kiryas School District. Some of the most major rabbis I could think of in that area bitterly opposed it. One I can think of in particular, one very holy man, an uncle to family of Rabbi Kiryas. They have much respect, and the Sam Rabbi Kiryas looks up to him as one of the oldest rabbis alive today. He literally opposed it, but the fact of the matter is that would be the salvation for East Ramapo. No taxation without representation. Now, people don't like the optics, even though there hasn't been wrongdoing. But people don't like the optics of seeing Hasidic and other Orthodox Jews on a school board of a public school, even though they have every right to be there. They're paying the taxes. However, if they don't like it, there's only really one answer in East Ramapo, and that is secession. That just like Kiryas Joel seceded from the Woodbury School District, so too, if in some way predominantly, or many of the predominantly Jewish areas of East Ramapo would secede from East Ramapo, form a new school district, it doesn't have to be a Kiryas Joel style school, meaning there would still be most likely some non-Jewish children in the area. So Kiryas Joel, the school is all Jewish, and the classes are conducted in Yiddish, but they're totally secular. There's no mezuzahs on the doors, and the religious teaching is of course separate. But in East Ramapo, it's possible they could form a new small school district. It could even be like a magnet school, very small, for a few kids, and all that tax money would be, for a few kids, and they would have a high level education, and these other, many of whom are illegal aliens, who don't even belong in America, should be deported, have no right to be there, and yet in East Ramapo, who are in the school district, they can go to the state and receive the funding they need, which much of that has been fixed. The state has recognized the need that the state should help with funding, because it is a poor district, particularly the children who are attending there have a very high poverty rate. The non-Jewish secular public schools there. And finally, Albany woke up and realized that they do need to help out, because, as they would with other districts that are in much better shape than East Ramapo, and financially, and yet East Ramapo has a pretty good record when compared to other local districts in general, in any event. Now, that being said, this was never an issue since the Kiryas Joel, from the point where the Kiryas Joel School District was formed. This issue disappeared. The problems that you have in East Ramapo currently are not the problems in Kiryas Joel. And so that's the most important reason why the Kiryas Joel School District is in good interest of Monroe Woodbury School District, is precisely for this reason, that good fences make good neighbors, and no taxation without representation, and no representation without taxation works the other way around. Meaning, Kiryas Joel is not being taxed for Monroe Woodbury, and they have no say in Monroe Woodbury. They're totally separate. And if some kind of an idea like that could be a major solution in East Ramapo as well, but for sure. sure the problems in East Ramapo are not the problems in Kiryas Joel for this precise reason. Now, further along, the next question that we have to address is what is this new thing that came up, although it's not new, it's been suggested for years, is secession from the town of Monroe. And there's much complaint in the town of Monroe about the block vote. And the block vote, of course, they mean the Kiryas Joel block vote, which is not a monolithic block vote. In recent years, just like the Torah have always liked to team up with anti-Semites, with like Ahmadinejad and Arafat and all of these, those who the Torah who are affiliated with the B'nai Yol and have been protesting against Kiryas Joel, protesting against the school district and so forth. They thought, they were fooled, because really United Monroe was mostly Zionist, mostly Jewish, secular Jewish. Those are the people who they're against. But they got fooled by them to think that it's a Gentile, anti-Semitic group, which it really isn't. And so they teamed up with them, which is their right. I have no problem with it. Just like really, a lot of the things that the Torah do. My main issues in the Torah is their lack of respect for the rabbis they disagree with. They're welcome to disagree, but they should disagree in a respectful way. I saw, protests against Rav Steinemann, ridiculous nonsense. No reason. You could disagree, and you might even have good points in certain aspects you're disagreeing with. But to be so disrespectful, why a Yid is coming from Bnei Brak, a Yid who's just Torah, and he's coming to Borough Park to say Torah. He's not speaking politics, and it's a chutzpah to come and protest. That's not Yiddishkeit. That's a problem. But to go and try and make peace with anti-Semites, like Yaakov Avinu did with Esau, like Jacob did with Esau, like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did with Sebastian, there's a place for that, and we don't need to be unified on that front. And it's good to have perhaps some of that. There is a positive aspect to that, even though it upsets a lot of people. And I don't necessarily agree with everything they do, but to a certain extent, I can understand the positivity behind what they do, even though I would never participate in that. And I really think it's at certain points they've crossed lines that have been pretty bad. But the idea, in essence, it's a good idea, but they've crossed a lot of lines, those groups, that have upset a lot of people. In any event, it's not a monolithic block. Absolutely not. However, so what's the point in this idea, first of all, of annexation, and also the idea of secession from the town of Monroe? What's the whole idea? And the idea is as follows. It's like we said before, we want to avoid the problems that we see in East Ramapo. Good fences make good neighbors. It is not in the interest of Kiryas Joel to have an annexation. Maybe a few developers are benefiting from it, but the average person in Kiryas Joel is not benefiting from it. Why do they support it? Those who do support it, there are some, perhaps many, who don't support these annexation or secession ideas. But those who do, other than the developers who are gaining from this, have one primary reason why they are seeking this, and that is good fences make good neighbors. Meaning, they want to stay loud shout from the United Monroe crowd, yes, move into our neighborhoods. But do you realize what that means? That means that you're basically asking that Monroe Woodbury is going to turn into East Ramapo. If you're okay with that, I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with that. No tax, but you got to realize, no taxation without representation. And people, the people of Kiryas want to live their lives with their lifestyle, their culture, their religion. And they have the right to do it, and the people in Monroe also have the right to have their voices heard and so forth. And really, again, like I said, the secession, the annexation, these are not in the interest of Kiryas. In many ways, they go against the interest of Kiryas, but they are done for one reason: to avoid conflict, to make peace. Kiryas doesn't get anything out of. They don't get anything out of the high density housing either. They don't really want it. Most of the people who move to Monroe, move to Kiryas, want low density housing, but because they don't want to move into the other neighborhoods, not because they don't like them, not because they want to stay away from them, but because they realize that they have different ideas, they have different ways they want to educate their children and so forth. For the interest of the people of Monroe, who are not Hasidic, that is why they are forcing themselves into this pain of the high density housing, of the annexation, of the secession, perhaps, not for their own interest, but for the purely altruistic interest of not getting into the business of the people of Monroe, of giving the people of Monroe their rights, which they are due and they need, and of weakening the voice of Kiryas, weakening the power of the platform, particularly with the secession, or the formation of a new town. And it's very curious to me, I've listened to much of words that came out of United Monroe, and at first glance, a lot of it sounded honest, a lot of it sounded real, that they really meant what they were saying. But when you really get into and learn about all of these things, they talk a lot about the environment. When you really learn about the environmentalist movement, all the whining about global warming and things like this, what they call climate change now, because they see that the warming isn't happening, it's getting colder, and so they got caught in their lie. All of this is about political power, and there are hints that are dropped along the lines. For example, now Emily Conver, she said, "Oh, I am a liberal progressive." That should have been a buzzer for anybody who knows what the liberal progressive movement is all about. The liberal progressive movement, the Democrats, although there was also conservative progressive movement, which is also just as dangerous, if not more dangerous. But the liberal progressive movement, the anti-liberty movement, the anti-growth movement, has been a movement of racism, of segregation, of slavery, Jim Crow, of Planned Parenthood, which is filled with racism, really has been out to wipe out the black race. That's what abortion, that's what Roe versus Wade, all these things are about, is to wipe out the black race. Marilyn Sanger, that was, and eugenics, and that's where Hitler really sprung up from the progressive movement. So that should have been a red flag when anybody heard that. But also there's a dishonesty. There's major dishonesty. What kind of dishonesty? What are we talking about? It's like this. You see there are certain rabble-rousers in different communities, people who they live off of hate. They don't. If all the problems that they claim they're coming to solve were solved, they'd be out of a job. People like Al Sharpton, people like Jesse Jackson. If they weren't, if everything was better, they'd be out of a job. They're rabble rousers. Now, so the question is, what kind of person is this Emily Convera? And I think this issue has brought out her dishonesty, because about 2 years ago, Harley Doles brought up a suggestion for Kiryas to secede and form its own town or its own city, which would remove, like we said, the block vote, and many other politicians have proposed this as well. And when they asked Emily Convera about it, and I think at the time maybe she was running against Doles, or maybe she had just lost her race against Doles for town supervisor, she laughed it off. She said they would never do that, because she basically insinuated that Kiryas just wants to leech off of Monroe and have power over Monroe, and they don't care, and they would never do such a thing because it's not in their interest to secede. Now it's really on the table. Kiryas put their money where their mouth is, and they offered their idea to secede from the town of Monroe and form their own town, the town of North Monroe. And there was talk earlier that it should be called the town of Satmar, this and that. In the end, they said that it's the town of North Monroe. That's what's on the table right now, proposition. That's been recently proposed. Now, so what's the story here? What do we have here with this proposition? The proposed acreage is already all basically vast majority Hasidic, whatever they want to add to the town. Again, this is not in the interest of Monroe, like Emily Convera said. It's in the interest of Monroe. Now Emily Convera can become the town supervisor. She'll probably run unopposed as town supervisor. United Monroe will be in control of Monroe, and it will bring the whole solution peace. And yet she's crying against it. Why? Because she knows she's not really suitable to be a town supervisor, and she'll be out of a job. That's what it seems to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but this rabble rousing is a good business for her. She makes all these quote-unquote fundraisers. She made a quote-unquote tax-exempt organization. They complain, they make all these claims that Kiryas doesn't pay taxes. Well, the fact of the matter is, there's a much higher percentage, maybe twice as much tax-exempt land in the non-Hasidic parts of Monroe, none of which is Hasidic, as opposed to Kiryas and the other Hasidic parts of Monroe. But the lies and the propaganda continue. That, they don't pay taxes, this and that. And here she has a tax-exempt organization that's really just a hate group. And she's really proven it here because she's contradicted herself. Here, everything is being given to her, and she doesn't want it, and she's fighting against it. That's the most ridiculous thing. It makes no sense. Now people said, yeah, because she's against annexation. Well, why would she be against annexation? Because she doesn't want Kiryas to have more power in Monroe. But they're giving up all their power in Monroe. They're giving up everything. They're going to be totally self-sufficient. Monroe is off the hook for Kiryas. It's the best thing for Monroe. I think most people in Monroe, if they think for 2 minutes, will realize that it is the best thing for the town of Monroe if Kiryas secedes and make a new town or a new city or whatever it is. It's going to be the best interest for the town of Monroe. And it's not really, like I said, it's not really the interest of Kiryas. It's in the interest of the town of Monroe. Now, and I think, with all of that being said, this answers the from the Satmar theology, which is not just Satmar, that was the theology of all Jews until about 150 years ago, when people started to go away from Judaism, particularly this aspect of Jewish theology, which originally the Reform also actually embraced, was the anti-Zionist ideology, was the original Reform. The Reform originally did not leave that original idea, although in some ways they became more extreme in it, and to a certain extent heretical, because they gave up the whole idea of Mashiach also, and that's extremely heretical. But until very recently, this was the ideology. This is the authentic Jewish theology, to recognize we're in exile and live in peace to the best of our abilities with our neighbors. And so, with all of this evidence that I've provided, the annexation, first of all, the school district has been in the interest of the Monroe-Woodbury School District, much more than it has been for the Kiryas School District. That's A. And the annexation would also be more in the interest of Monroe outside of Kiryas, the non-Hasidic parts of Monroe, than it would be for Kiryas. And certainly, without any doubt, the secession from the town of Monroe would be the perfect solution to all the problems in the town of Monroe. Now, okay, perhaps it's not really any new problems in Orange County on the county level. I mean, these problems are going to come either way, and this will also probably help. I'm not sure how, but for sure, that's neither here nor there, because we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, and it's not really such an issue, and I don't think it'll ever be an issue, because Orange County is very big, and to expand a square mile village to become a square mile and a half town, I don't think will really do any harm on the county level either. No, it's still going to be much smaller than Middletown, Newburgh, all these other cities that are in Orange County. Orange County is very big, so it really, and so the block vote on the county level would be practically insignificant, and would only have any power on a coalition level, making coalitions with whatever parties, with the Democrats, whatever they see as in their interest. And like I said, more and more diversity is coming to Kiryas, and the block vote, in essence anyway, is getting weaker and weaker as time goes on, as we've seen in the most recent elections on the local level. That being said, so I think we've answered on the religious level all of the questions as far as, is Kiryas a violation of the Satmar ideology? And I feel that the current Satmar Rebbe is 100% correct. He's being faithful to the ways of his great uncle, and he's not violating that in any way. This is no way a violation of Zionism to have a village, or even to have a town, or even theoretically if it would be a county or even one of the 50 states, and mainly because we're still under American sovereignty and not independent. Perhaps to be one of the 50 states could be an issue. It's the question of unionism versus confederatism. If it was a Confederate style state, I don't mean as far as slavery, I mean as far as the Articles of Confederation, then it could be problematic. But greater union of the 50 states in the Republican sense, I don't see any issue religiously, although that's of course never going to happen. There's no question that will never happen. And even at a county level, it's never going to happen. There's not going to be a new county either. I think this is where it's going to end, that it'll be a new town. The thing is, most people on Facebook, they don't even think about it. Oh, whatever they want is bad. Whatever Kiryas wants is bad, and they're automatically fighting against it without giving it two thoughts. Think about it rationally. It's really not in the interest of Kiryas. It's really totally in the interest of the town of Monroe, outside of Kiryas, even with the annexation, even with the extra land added. Why do they even want the annexation? It's also for the interest of Monroe. People don't want the people in these Blooming Grove and these areas. They're complaining. We don't want them living here. We don't want the Hasidim to move here. So this is the only answer. I think most of the people in Kiryas, they would be more comfortable living in a lower density area and moving into places like Blooming Grove, not changing the zoning in Blooming Grove, just staying how they are, moving to Washingtonville, moving to all these places, having a small group with a minyan, 10 families, and a little shul and the mikveh, and sending their kids on the bus to Kiryas, and really to spread out within the 15 miles around Kiryas and just send their kids to Kiryas schools. But it's obvious that the people around wouldn't want that, and I can understand why. So here's the answer. Is, of course it would be better and more comfortable and happier for the average chassid to move out and to have a nice little community. Some people like it this way, some people like it that way. But a lot of people are liking the smaller ideas, but the people around them don't want it. And so this is the answer. We'll have like this. We have the village like this, and there we have the answer. Now, the question goes further. But basically, I think we've answered the questions from a religious aspect. Is totally in the interest, and I would be willing to debate anybody who opposes this plan to show how, in essence, by offering this plan, Kiryas, of the secession from the town of Monroe, they are being mostly, maybe not purely, because there are some people who are going to gain from it, developers and so forth, perhaps, and I'm sure there'll be new jobs. They'll need a new post office, they'll need new municipal buildings, and there'll be jobs for the people in Kiryas, which will be a wonderful thing. You have new jobs for the light, for the ladies, for anybody there that's looking for jobs. It will be those few people who are going to gain from this. So it's not 100% altruistic, but I'd say it's still about 90% altruism that this offer to secede from Monroe, even with a few 100 acres added, that's really not that much land when it comes down to it. And I'm very happy if anybody, I'm always trying my best to be polite and to be respectful. I know I said some things, and I apologize if I'm wrong, but prove me wrong, please. Explain what's wrong with this. They're just going to cry and whine about, their Captain Planet nonsense, everybody who really knows behind the scenes of the environmental movement knows that this is just a political ploy, just a scare tactic that the progressives use. You can read Glenn Beck's new book, explains all about this, and many others explain. Mark Levin has spoken much about it, about this anti-growth movement. It's really an anti-humanist movement, and that's why, and an anti-life movement. That's why these people are pro-abortion and so forth. It's really essentially a plan to depopulate the country by the left, by the progressive liberals, by the Wilsonian type people, and it's been borne out. There's a pillar, in Georgia talking about this. This is their plan. It's written on the walls in the Denver airport that they have, the liberal progressives, the eugenists, they have a plan to depopulate the country, and they're scaring people with these types of things, and they really want to make a Holocaust much more than Hitler made. Hitler would be a drop in the bucket compared to what these people want. And when they see here's a group that's the exact opposite of this, they're growing, they're having lots of children, they're doing God's work, what God plans. God said the earth was not created to be empty, it was created to fill it. And this is what all people are supposed to do, not only Jewish people. The commandment to be fruitful and multiply was given to Adam and Eve. It was given to the first people, which means the parents of all people have this obligation, but most people are selfish. I mean, I myself, I sometimes think twice in my heart. I'll admit, can I really manage with more kids? But the thing is, this is what God wants. This is, even now, and we see the shocking thing, how we have the Pope who's embraced this progressive liberal ideology, that he made fun of one of the pillars of the Catholic Church is to have a lot of children, and here is someone who's supposed to be the Pope, and he's saying, it's not supposed to be like rabbits, como conejos. I was shocked. This is a Pope, Of course, we've had the share of politicized popes in history. If you study the history of the Church, they weren't all Pope John Paul, who was really, a saintly man. And although this new Pope has a lot of nice things to him, he's definitely iconoclastic. That's how it is. In any event, when people see this, that's why they're fighting so much against this. And in addition to other things, of course, the Zionists, who have a very big influence in the media and so forth, of course, spread under the table lots and lots of propaganda and lies against the Satmar community, which is well known and obvious. And since they have so many media connections, of course, that would explain it as well. But in any event, if anyone wants to debate this, I'm very much convinced. I don't care which way it goes. Things can continue they are. I think it's the interest of the Hasidic community that they do spread out and have smaller communities and so forth. But it's in the interest of Monroe and these other communities that they don't, and that's why they've all throughout their history of Kiryas, there have been these concessions that have been done purely altruistically for the sake of the benefit of our Gentile neighbors. And I'll end off with a story I've told before, that one of my teachers in high school, Moshe Weinberger, is Gavarnik Groiser Rebbe in Woodmere. He's a big mashpia. Like how they call Moshe Wilson mashkiach. So now Moshe Weinberger is going the mashpia. It's a new thing in the past few years. That we just called him Rebbe when we were kids. So and that's what I always remember in the Medrash over the years. But anyway, he said when he was in German, he came for a bracha. Maybe he was a chosin. Came for a bracha to Samarov in Kiryas. They had never been there before. He gets there. He sees a local man with a few teeth missing and a plaid shirt, and he's kind of scared. Is this guy an anti-Semite? We got to learn that the good American Christian people are not anti-Semites. The anti-Semites are the self-hating Jews, and the other liberals who are the Nachschleppers after them, the liberal progressives. Don't forget, Nazi is National Socialist. That's the Nazi party is essentially a left-wing party, a left-wing liberal progressive party. That's Nazism. So in any event, Rabbi Weinberger, he was scared he said, "Oh, are you a friend of old Rabbi Joel? Any friend of old Rabbi Joel is a friend of mine. Ever since he came here, life has gotten better here." Like Rabbi Weinberg explained, the Zchus of a tzaddik extends not only to Jewish people, it's universal. The hashpah, the blessings, the outpouring of blessings, and we see Monroe has grown over the past 40 years. It used to be, nothing, and now it's a big, major town, very successful, one of the few places in New York State I've ever seen where business looks very successful. You don't see boarded up, closed stores like you see in other places. You see a lively, good, nice life. And all of that, of course, is in the merit of the blessing of a great servant of God, that God blessed the area in his merit of having the Satmar Rebbe buried there, and having that the Satmar Rebbe lived there, even if it was briefly, and the tzaddikim who are living there now, and ba'amich kulam tzaddikim. Alright, I'd like to make the next video should be about the American aspects of this. So we'll pause for now, and we'll continue with a video discussing the constitutional and legal, civil laws of this question of Kiryas. God bless and thank you.